What happened when my abusive coach found out my dad is a street boxer? Coach Brennan grabbed my shoulder during water break and squeezed hard enough to leave bruises. He leaned close, so only I could hear, and said, if I missed another layup during practice, he'd make me run suicides until I puked. His breath smelled like coffee and cigarettes, and his grip felt like iron clamps digging into muscle. I was 15 years old, 5'9", and weighed maybe 130 soaking wet. He was 6'3", 240 pounds, a former college athlete who'd washed out of coaching at better schools and ended up at Lincoln High, where nobody asked too many questions about his methods. The gymnasium echoed with squeaking shoes and bouncing basketballs. My teammates ran drills while Brennan held me in place, his fingers pressing into the exact spot he'd grabbed yesterday and the day before that. The bruises formed layers now, purple and yellow and green, a timeline of his discipline mapped across my shoulders and arms. I kept my face blank because showing pain only made him squeeze harder. He released me finally and shoved me back toward the court. I stumbled but caught myself before falling. Nobody looked at me directly, but I could feel them watching from the corners of their eyes. I'd been on varsity basketball since freshman year because I was fast and could shoot threes with decent accuracy. Brennan had been coaching at Lincoln for 12 years and had a reputation for winning games and producing players who went to college on scholarships. What people didn't talk about openly was how he treated the kids who weren't his favorites, the ones who didn't come from families with money or connections. I was one of those kids. My mom worked double shifts as a nurse, and my dad did construction and odd jobs, whatever kept bills paid and food on the table. We lived in the apartments on the east side where rent was cheap and nobody complained about noise. Practice lasted 2 more hours and Brennan found reasons to single me out 11 times. I counted because counting gave me something to focus on besides the fear in my stomach. He made me run extra drills while everyone else rested. He criticized my form on every shot even when the ball went through the net clean. He assigned me to guard our best player during scrimmage and then screamed at me when I couldn't stop him from scoring. The other guys on the team stayed quiet and kept their heads down. They'd learned the same lesson I was learning now. Speaking up meant becoming the new target. After practice ended, I changed clothes in the locker room while my shoulders throbbed with deep aching pain. DeAndre Wilson sat on the bench next to me tying his shoes. He was a junior, our starting point guard, and one of Brennan's favorites because his dad owned 3 car dealerships and donated money to the athletic department. He glanced at my shoulder where the bruise was visible above my t-shirt collar and said quietly that Brennan had been worse this season than ever before. His voice dropped so low, I had to lean in to hear him say that 2 players had quit already and one kid's parents were talking about filing a complaint. I asked why nobody had reported him yet. DeAndre finished tying his shoes and stood up. He said his dad told him that Brennan had connections with the school board and the athletic director. Complaints disappeared and families who pushed too hard found their kids benched or kicked off teams. The system protected coaches who won championships, regardless of how they treated players. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone in the locker room with damp concrete walls that smelled like sweat and mildew and years of teenage boys trying to become men under pressure they didn't know how to handle. I walked home through streets where streetlights flickered and cast uneven shadows across cracked sidewalks. My backpack felt heavier than usual, loaded with textbooks I'd need for homework I was too tired to complete. The apartment building rose 6 stories with exterior hallways and iron railings. Our unit was on the 4th floor at the end of the corridor. I could hear my little sister Tessa laughing before I opened the door. She was 8 years old and watching cartoons on the couch while Mom made dinner in the kitchen. Mom looked up when I came in and immediately noticed something was wrong. She had that ability mothers develop to read their children's pain even when they're trying to hide it. She asked if I was okay and I said I was fine, just tired from practice. She studied my face for another moment before returning to chopping vegetables. I dropped my backpack by the door and headed to the bathroom to examine my shoulders in the mirror. The bruises were worse than I'd thought, deep purple marks that wrapped around the joint where Brennan's fingers had dug in repeatedly over the past 2 weeks. Dad came home an hour later while we were eating dinner. He worked construction for a company that did commercial renovations and came home every night covered in dust and dried sweat. He kissed Mom and ruffled Tessa's hair before sitting down at the table. His hands were scarred from years of manual labor and his knuckles looked swollen from some injury he hadn't mentioned. He asked about my day and I gave him the standard response that school was fine and practice was fine and everything was fine. He watched me with dark eyes and what happened next changed everything. Full story is linked below or on my channel.